Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I am Katie, and I work at the McDowell Environmental Center. I've been working here for about 2 years, and one of my favorite things in the whole wide world, ever since I was little, is learning, talking about, and experiencing life with salamanders. Salamanders are a really special type of creature called an amphibian. And that just means that they need water to survive. Most amphibians are born in the water. They hatch out of eggs and they have gills and fins and they swim around almost like little tadpoles. Those are called larvae. And a salamander larva will then, as an adult, climb up onto land, and instead of breathing with gills, it'll get rid of its gills and grow lungs. And that is called metamorphosis. It's just the change of life that these guys go through. Almost like when a caterpillar turns to a butterfly or a tadpole turns into a frog. Salamanders and all amphibians go through something very special called metamorphosis. And I just find these creatures so fascinating. They're slimy and weird and cool, and they always need that water to survive, even when they do go up onto land. And so right here, I have a very special boy to show you, and this is Camp McDowell's tiger salamander. We've had the tiger salamander in our care for about a year now. And he was surrendered to us from a situation where he was a pet and his owner no longer was able to take care of him. And so we ended up taking him in as a rescue animal. Our tiger salamander does not have a name because he's not our pet. We use him for education. But I just really enjoy this creature. In the wild, there are so many different types of salamanders. They can come as big as this tiger salamander. Look how big he is compared to my hand. He's huge, like a dinosaur. But some of them are as little as like just an inch or two, or even smaller than that. But this one specifically is the tiger salamander, and he is a type of salamander that likes to dig burrows. Meaning that you're not just gonna flip a rock and find a salamander like this. Their burrows can be up to 2 feet deep. It's just really neat because they are able to protect themselves that way. And check this guy out. He is an incredible carnivore. So out in the wild, he would be eating worms, snails, even fish. Anything that would fit into his big, wide mouth, he could eat. And so that's why they do so well in the wild, and they can be found all throughout the United States, in southern Canada, and in Mexico, just all over the place. I've never found one of these in the wild, but they are really common to have as pets, which is what happened to this guy. Is he was a pet, and then his owner wasn't able to take care of him anymore. Yeah. They're known as being like a pretty good pet, but do know that their lifespan is up to 15 years. That's older than most dogs live. And so, when they're being kept as a pet, it's very important that the owner knows that they need to keep the salamander for 15 years out of their whole life. So if you're 12 years old, you're gonna have your salamander into your 30s. Which is wild. It's so crazy to think about. Oh, the tiger salamander. Are there any questions about the tiger salamander? I would love to answer some questions if you have any about this neat little dude.
Katie, for all of those people that are just tuning in now, can you tell them what he eats or what they eat?
Yes, so the tiger salamander is a straight up carnivore. He does not eat plants, no algae, no nothing. He will chase his prey and eat things like slugs, worms, snails, fish, bugs, all sorts of different things that he can find in the ground. Because again, he burrows deep underground and that's where he lives. So all of those little creepy crawlies become food for the tiger salamander. But in our captivity, since he's not in the wild, we have him in a pretty big tank where he can burrow and dig as much as he wants, and we do feed him things like worms. And sometimes we even feed him baby mice, which is really interesting because really he can eat anything that's living or once living that can fit in his mouth. And like, if you want to take a closer look, his mouth is almost like Pac-Man. It goes all around from behind his eye, all around to the front, and then behind his other eye. So if he opens his mouth, it's actually quite large. And he can eat anything that'll fit in there.
What is his favorite food?
He loves just anything that will wriggle around. A lot of times when I feed him, I will purposely move the thing around, even if it's not living anymore, because he loves the chase of it. It's kind of fun for him, I think, when he eats. And tiger salamanders tend to eat a lot. Like out in the wild, they can't guarantee where their next meal is going to come from. And so when they get the chance to eat, they're going to eat. And so they're actually really prone to obesity.
Is this one obese?
I think he's pretty overweight, yeah. And it's because no matter what, they're always going to want more food. And so this salamander's previous owner, I think, probably fed him too much, thinking that the salamander was hungry and needed more food, when actually he needed to be on a diet the whole time. So.
Do tiger salamanders live in Alabama in the wild?
Yeah, you can find them in Alabama in the wild and all over the United States. They have an extremely wide range compared to a lot of different types of salamanders. But again, it's just difficult to find them in the wild because they're burrowed so deep underground. It's not something like you can just flip a rock and find them. Like a lot of other salamanders. When I was growing up, I would always be outside looking for salamanders and things. And even though tiger salamanders did exist in the wild where I lived, I was never able to find one. And up to this day, I've never found one in the wild. They're just pretty rare to find, but in actuality, there's so many of them out there. And that's what makes them really, really unique and cool.
Why is his tail flat like that?
Yes, good question. So because he's an amphibian, this salamander started off as a larva born into the water. And even now, even though he can be on land and can burrow, the flat tail is just so that he can swim well. A flat tail, picture almost like a fish's fin. It's flat so that it can push the water around and make it a good swimmer. Like if you put on some flippers and swim around in the pool, it's kind of like that, where it would make you go faster and you're just a better swimmer because of it. It's like when a dog has webbed feet, sort of like that. Yeah.
Victoria wants to know, how fast can he move?
You know, this salamander can move surprisingly fast, but he usually doesn't. In the wild, they typically just sort of camp out in one area. Like they have a little territory that they hang out in. And so they don't move around a whole ton. So I've never seen him move very fast, but I'm sure he could with the right motivation. And I really don't know how to quantify how fast he moves, like how to tell you. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, like that. He can move that fast, yes.
What about I've noticed that you haven't touched him. Why are you not touching him?
Yeah, so salamanders and any amphibian in the wild really should not be touched by humans, because not only can he breathe through his lungs, or if he had gills as a baby, he could breathe through gills, but he can also breathe through his skin. And so he's absorbing water and oxygen through his entire surface area of his body. And that means that if I were to touch him with my fingers, he might absorb the soap that I washed my hands with this morning, the hand sanitizer that I put on. He might even absorb just the oils that are on my fingers as a human, and that could potentially make him sick. like if you're outside and you find a salamander and you're wearing sunscreen, if you touch that salamander, it's like him breathing in the sunscreen, which is not good for him. And so, yeah, that's why I'm not touching him and handling him, and he's just in this little enclosure right now. But you'll notice that in the bottom, we have these wet paper towels. That's because he does always need to be moist, and that's typically why they burrow down into the ground, is just to keep that moisture, because they do need it to help with their skin and to keep it soft and smooth and breathable.
Awesome. If there are any other questions about this salamander, we can answer them, but we are gonna move on to our other really cool animal soon here. We'll give y'all a second if you want to ask any more questions about this one.
What a neat creature. In the wild too, they can have any sort of different pattern. In the wild, you would find a tiger salamander with dark all over and then stripes of almost like yellow or a brighter color, and that's why they're called a tiger salamander in the first place. But in our case, our tiger salamander almost looks like a pickle. He's green and he has these little dark spots, and that again is just because he was raised in the pet trade as a pet. Almost like how you can breed different dogs together to get different types of dogs, you can also breed salamanders together and get different patterns. And so this one just so happens to be a pattern that might not be so common in the wild, but since they exist in so many places, I'm sure the pattern in the wild looks different no matter where you go. But ours is just a special pickle boy.
That's
why I love him.
Yeah. How much does he weigh? Do we have any idea?
I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
I know that he weighs more than he's supposed to. But yeah, I don't know if I can really compare him to anything. He probably weighs about the same as an apple.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So moving on to our next creature, I just want to tell you a little bit about it first. The next animal I'm about to show you is also an amphibian, and it is also a salamander. And it's actually really closely related to the tiger salamander, but it's unique in a couple different ways. It is called an axolotl, and they are native only to lakes around Mexico City. They cannot be found anywhere else in the world, and they are actually going extinct. Their population is going down because with the population of humans increasing, they are experiencing a lot of pollution and habitat loss. And so in the wild, they are very rare to find. And so they're actually being kept alive through the pet trade, which is just a really unique circumstance. And a couple other things make them special too. It's that, like I said, all salamanders go through a larval stage where they breathe through gills and live in the water. The axolotl stays that way for its whole life. It never goes through metamorphosis, and that is called neoteny, where it keeps its traits that it has as a larva, but continues to grow for its entire lifespan, keeping those traits. It's really neat. So if you want to come over and take a look at our axolotl here, this one is not an educational animal. This is just my personal pet, honestly. What you see me doing here is I'm holding some tongs in front of him, and he knows that when he sees the red tongs, he's going to get fed. So what you see him doing is trying to eat the tongs, which is quite funny. But yeah, like I said, axolotls are very closely related to tiger salamanders, and I bet you can see the similarities when you look at him. But if you take a look at what's surrounding his face, those are his gills, those feathery looking things on the outside. Those are the gills, the type of gills that larval salamanders have. So yes, this is an axolotl, but because he's a pet and he's my pet, we have a name for him. And his name is Guppy. He's not an actual guppy, but we just like to call him that. And again, for the same reason, I'm not going to reach in and touch him with my hands because his skin is very absorbent and I don't want to accidentally poison him or make him sick. But yeah, just really, really unique and really cool. You might even see axolotls in pet stores and things like that. And that's what happened with this axolotl. I heard that a local pet store had an axolotl, and I didn't know if I agreed with them having it or not. So I went to check it out, and I just decided to take this guy because I knew that I could give him a better life, and I was willing to take care of him for the whole 15 years that his lifespan is. But that's also the same situation that we were in when we got the tiger salamander that I showed you earlier. Just at the pet store is where we found that somebody had surrendered their pet that they had had for a while. So we actually ended up getting this axolotl and the tiger salamander at the same time. It's just that we donated one to Camp McDowell and one we kept as a pet. Now, I keep saying pet, but I don't recommend them as a pet, especially if you've never owned an amphibian before. And if you're pretty young, it's hard to know where you're going to be later when you grow up. So having him for the whole 15 years, you just have to be aware before adopting any animal that you need to be prepared to have them for that whole time and really take care of them. Are there any questions about Guppy, the axolotl?
What do they prefer to eat?
So it's kind of similar to the tiger salamander, really. They can eat anything they can fit in their mouths. So since this is an aquatic animal, meaning that they stay underwater for their whole life, they'll eat things like fish, snails, different like bugs that are swimming around. They will eat other salamanders or even frogs and tadpoles. They will literally eat anything that they can fit into their mouth. But what we feed Guppy, especially in this time where we're supposed to not be going to the store and things like that, is we have a base diet of these just sinking carnivore pellets. They have the nutrients that a carnivore needs. And I can show you how I feed Guppy right now. Let me get a pellet. So I was saying earlier that Guppy associates the red tweezers with his food. So if I just put the pellets in, he won't recognize it as food. Come here, Guppy. Come here. Here, get it. Oh. See, if I just dropped it here, he would not notice that it was food. So I have to like pick it up. How are you gonna eat? Oh, there! See? So that's how we feed our axolotl. And we'll give him other things like worms and sometimes even little shrimp that you can get at the pet store. But right now, he's doing just fine growing up with these pellets as his food. If you want more information on how to take care of axolotls or what they're like in the wild, there are plenty of resources online that you can look at. What you're looking at right now, this axolotl that I have, you can notice that he's brown and speckled. This is what they would look like in the wild. But you may have seen axolotls that are pink or black, and those ones are rare cases that are specific to the pet trade. You would not find a pink albino axolotl in the wild. Any other questions?
So this one looks like what it would look like in the wild.
Yeah, this is called a wild type axolotl. He's meant to blend into mud and rocks and dirt, like in a natural lake that you would find.
Beth Stewart says, tell us about how they are unique, being able to regenerate most of their body, including heart and brain.
Yes, axolotls are super cool. If Guppy were to get hurt, if this axolotl were to get hurt, he could regrow any of his limbs, and also his heart, his brain, all of that stuff. That's a really good point. And so scientists are actually looking into figuring out how we can use axolotl strategies in order to help heal humans and help heal sick people. I don't know if they've actually made any discoveries with that, but this is one of the animals that can actually regrow a lot of different parts of its bodies, more so than a lot of other animals.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Can he have another pellet?
Yes, he can have another pellet. He's sort of hiding in the back right now, but let's see.
He's camera shy.
Come here. I'll push him. Whoa! Zoom in. Oh, Guppy. It may look like I'm being rough with him, but I'm actually being very, very gentle. He just floats. It's kind of like when you tap a balloon and it moves really far, that kind of thing. Yeah. Oh,
Missed it.
missed it. Come on. Oh, dropped it. See, yeah, here's the other thing. It's kind of difficult to feed him because he misses all the time and stuff. So it's kind of an effort. Like, it takes maybe 10, 15 minutes to feed him every day. I don't know if he's going to eat it. If you saw, he just tried to lunge at the tongs themselves, not the actual food. Neat, bud. Happy Earth Day! This is your Earth Day treat. You want it? Excellent. Excellent.
He doesn't want to eat anymore.
They're pretty messy pets to have, to be honest.
How do you clean its tank?
Cleaning the tank is a whole process. Every week, we stir up the sand and drain all of the water out up until maybe like an inch of, and then we put all new dechlorinated water in, so he cannot have chlorine, and we have to treat the water we put into the tank. So every single week we have to do full water changes for him to make sure that his water is nice and clean. Because if he's leaving his food like this and pooping in the water every single day, that makes the water get really dirty, and that's not good for him, so he could potentially get sick. And so we do have to clean it pretty rigorously every week, and that takes a lot of time and effort too. But anything for our sweet boy. See him? Look at that
There he
little
is.
face.
He's being shy.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't really do much.
Yeah.
But notice that this guy also has a really flat tail, similar to the tiger salamander, except even more so. And that's just to help him in his ability to swim through the water, almost like a tadpole.
Great.
Yeah.
If y'all are just tuning in, we're talking about how this little one is very similar to this one right here.
Yeah. So this is the tiger salamander, and the one that you just saw was called an axolotl, and they're very closely related in the wild.
Oh, do you want to talk about what you have there?
Oh, yeah. I was at Five Below a month ago before all this COVID stuff started, and they had a little axolotl stuffed animal. See her gills? We call her Guppy's girlfriend. So, yeah, it's just a really sweet thing. So I feel like a lot of people actually do know what axolotls are, but I think it's really important to learn more about them because they are so critically endangered and also just so cool, like so scientifically cool, and just such neat creatures to observe and learn about. I don't know. I've always just really loved them. And I hope that this video made you feel more interested in learning about salamanders and amphibians in general. There is so much to learn, and scientists are still figuring things out about them today. But they're everywhere. Like, you can find them in Alabama and all over the country. And in Alabama, there are so many different kinds, it's unbelievable. This is one of my favorite places I've ever lived because of the abundance of these critters that are everywhere. So when you get a chance, whether it's today, tomorrow, or next year, I encourage you to go look for some of these guys out in the wild and also to look up more facts about them. Because after all, it is Earth Day, and this Earth deserves us to be learning about it and figuring things out. It is just an incredible thing that we are able to do. And so thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate you tuning into these videos, and I hope you enjoyed it. And so yeah, take care, be safe, love you all, be yourselves.
We miss you.
We miss you.